time to get back into action with Indiana Jones for episode 3 of the Indiana Jones tapes. Yes, that's right. Welcome back. My name is Paul Munt. This is my Wood of Stuff. Yep, it's part 3 of my look back at the adventures of Indiana Jones in the preparation for the new film, which is coming out in a couple of weeks. I thought it was out in July, but it appears to be out somewhere on the 28th. So a couple of weeks' time, we'll be seeing the 5th and final Indiana Jones film. But before that, let's look back at the 3rd film, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade from 1989, written by the late Jeffrey Boehm from... an idea by, or co-idea from George Lucas, and of course directed by Steven Spielberg, starring of course Harrison Ford as the apparently indestructible Indiana Jones, the archaeologist stroke lecturer, with a guest cast that includes Alison Doody, Denham Elliott, the brilliant Julian Glover, John Rhys Davies, and of course the legend that is the late Sean Connery as Indy's father, Professor Henry Jones. This is a film that was in development for some time. I've been doing a bit of reading about it before I sat down to talk to you about it today. And I think it was almost a classic example of too many cooks throwing in too many ingredients for what they thought the film should include. You had George Lucas throwing in ideas, Steven Spielberg with things he wanted to do, various script drafts, bringing in new characters and developing things and chucking things out, as is the way, I suppose, with most films. What is clear with this film, watching it now, is that it was intended to round off the trilogy, what was always the planned trilogy of Indiana Jones films. And what this does very nicely is square the circle a bit about Indiana himself. It tells us more about him, how he became the man we know him to be, and how his character was formed very much by his relationship with his father. That doesn't mean it's a very intense, boring psychodrama, angst-driven drama of people talking about their feelings in their past. Of course not, it's an action-adventure film. But these elements are seeded very subtly, I think, into what is a very good script, and it's a very good film. It's not, however, not the best Indiana Jones film. The story, as you will know, of course, is that we're now in 1938. Indiana Jones is tasked with finding the Holy Grail, and more specifically, finding another explorer who's been sent to find it, who's gone missing. He's told by his paymaster, if you like, played brilliantly by one of my favourite actors, Julian Glover, that the previous explorer who's gone missing is Indy's father, Henry Jones. So, of course, that makes up Indiana's mind. He has to go and find out what's happened to his father as urgently as he has to find the Holy Grail. And that sets us off on the usual breakneck adventure across to Venice, first of all, then to Austria, and finally out into the desert where the cataclysmic climax takes place. What I liked about this film particularly, I did like the bits that added some colour to Indiana Jones's character. I particularly liked the opening sequence starring the late River Phoenix as young Indiana Jones, which explains how he became the archetype figure of Indiana Jones that we know. Sorry, there's some sort of animal squawking out there. With the whip, the fedora, and the jacket. He is inspired by another adventurer who he meets very early on in the film, who has found this crucifix-type artifact. And that sets in the frame of mind that we know of Indiana Jones, that he thinks these things should be on display. They're not just to be possessed by millionaires and rich people. They should be on display for the public to see. That's a very nice sequence. It's very excitingly done and involves a chase on a train and lots of daring do. And the film does encapsulate that, again, that Saturday morning feeling. That was the whole point of these films in the first place. It also switches up the sort of romantic love interest we've had in the previous films. We've had Indiana's had his lady of the film. Here he has the lady of the film, who turns out to be not quite what is expected. It's Alison Doody as... it sounds like there's a duck outside. I don't think there is, but there's all sorts of strange wildlife around here. Anyway, Alison Doody plays this sort of scientist who helps him find the clues that will lead on to the location of his father, and that involves a perilous and quite frankly horrible rat-infested exploration of the sewers of Venice. But she turns out to be a Nazi spy. Sorry if that's a spoiler. This film's 34 years old. She turns out to be a Nazi spy, and that's a nice little twist on the usual screaming heroine that we've had in the previous two films. And that is a nice little twist. And then we rattle along, like as I said, we get more adventures and daring do. And interestingly, Sean Connery doesn't appear till about 50 minutes into the film. But we've had so much build-up into him appearing and the part he's going to play in the story that when he arrives, it isn't a disappointment, because the chemistry between him and Harrison Ford, who at the time was actually only a few years younger, I think, than Sean Connery, it is superb. They really spark off each other well. You can see Indiana in his father. You can see why Indiana's become the man he is because of his father's attitude and his views on things and his whole worldview, I suppose. And they eventually launch themselves on this adventure. They escape from the Nazis out of Austria on a thrilling biplane aerial flight sequence, battle sequence. And the film reaches its climax in the scene out in the desert involving a tank, numerous soldiers, armed vehicles. It's a thrilling set piece which ends with that fantastic sequence on the cliff edge where it appears that Indiana has plunged to his doom as the tank crashes over the edge of the ravine, and of course he isn't dead. It's a thrilling and exciting, really, it's what Indiana Jones films are all about. Unfortunately, what comes afterwards is a bit of an anticlimax as the film drifts into that sort of slightly supernatural thing that the films have always done. It has never felt really as if it belongs in the Indiana Jones films. We've had the Ark of the Ark of the Covenant in the first film, which had its mysterious supernatural powers. We had all the voodoo and mumbo jumbo in the second film, and in this one we have a mysterious 800-year-old soldier who's been trapped and guarding the Grail, and all the stuff about the Grail's powers to resuscitate and save life. And I think it's odd that the films have always gone down that road. And of course, we know what happens in the next one. And in fact, the one that's about to come out has got a device that can change time, apparently. So it's funny that the films have always dallied with this idea of weirdness and extraterrestrials and ghosts and things, when they're very much rousing boys' own adventures for the most part. So I feel that the last part of the last reel is a bit of a letdown, because we've had the big action climax, and we've just got almost like tidying up loose ends with the Grail itself. And there's some nice fun sequences there. I quite like the bit where Indiana has to go into the tunnels and has these three tasks that he has to find his way through, these death traps, which is very, very Indiana Jones. But the pace just slackens. It does inevitably slackens as we reach the climax of the film. And the climax is very nice because Indiana and the others leave the caves and they quite literally ride off into the sunset. And I think that was such a lovely way to end the series and the characters. Indiana's reunited with his father. He's got the greatest or has achieved the greatest feat of his career, even though he's not able to prove it to anybody. And he just rides off into the sunset, and you sort of think, yeah, that's a nice way to leave it. But of course he couldn't leave it at that, because we've got the two films that have followed. And you feel it's a shame that they couldn't have stuck to their guns and done the trilogy that they promised, because it does end so well. But unfortunately the financiers speak a bit louder than the creatives, and the lure of making a bit more cash from an IP is just too strong, especially these days. So the downsides of the film are a couple of dodgy visuals, I have to say. There's a bit of green screen that's of its time, shall we say, particularly in the air battle once Indy and Henry escape from the Nazi-powered Zeppelin. There's a bit of iffy green screen there. There are one or two scenes where the technology has moved on so much that those scenes just wouldn't exist. And I don't judge things by their visual effects. It's the story that matters. But I think that they're in a big film like this, you do tend to notice them a little bit. So there are a little bit of jarring things there. And as I said, I do think that the pace slackens off towards the end. But all in all, it's another rousing adventure. It's certainly powered by that relationship between Indy and his father, which is a joy to behold, because it's clear that Sean Connery is enjoying himself, and he didn't always enjoy himself in some of his later films. But he's clearly having a good time here, sparring playfully with Indiana Jones. And it just comes across that they really are a father and son who may have some distance between them, but they're really very close. So I enjoyed the film. It's not the best. At the end of the next film, I will do my rankings of the Indiana Jones films, and then when I've seen Dial of Destiny, I'll fit it into the ranking. But it's certainly very entertaining and doesn't let the side down. It is another good, solid Indiana Jones film, and I thoroughly enjoyed it, and I'm going to give it 8.5 out of 10 for Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Right, thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed this video. I just want to say, if you're new, if you are, a few new subscribers have come on board recently, which is wonderful. Thank you very much. If you've enjoyed the video that got you here and you watched this, why not stick around? There's loads more stuff to come, all sorts of things. All sorts of things. Film reviews, TV reviews, book reviews, Blu-ray trips, out and abouts, Doctor Who content for the Doctor Who fans. So lots of stuff to come, so stick around. Why don't you? Right, I'll see you soon. Until I do, keep taking the stuff.